We all talk about AI every day, but today I want to show you what we have built. So my colleague Krishna is in the back, so we'll bring up the demo. Yes, so our product is called Magic. It stands for Multi-Agent Generative Investment Copilots. It's actually listed on the Microsoft Teams App Store, which allowed us to provide access to millions of users in financial services. So today I want to focus on two things. Number one is, we think for GenAI to take us to the promised land, we need a major UI breakthrough. Because up to this point, people's experience with GenAI is mainly restricted to chatbots, like ChatGPT, like Claude. But for AI to really make a difference, we have to move beyond that, and that has to be something like a multi-AI agent framework. So Magic is a multi-AI agent framework. The idea is we have a team of specialists. Each AI agent is powered by a large language models and able to access private tools and data sets. Each one is tuned and trained to do very specific things. And because the niche focus of each agent, we are able to eval their performance and make sure they do the job very much to the standard of a human professionals. And once we have the team of AI agents, we can just ask them to do research and ask questions. So we prepare this question, which can be quite interesting and topical. So let me explain what happens now. So the prompt is about analyzing the Trump administration's policies and its impact on the markets. So what's going on here is there is a hidden chief of staff AI agent in the background. And that chief of staff interacts with me and translates my questions and problems into a plan. So you can see the plan is made up of a list of tasks. And you can see the tasks on the right-hand side. When I tell my chief of staff the problem I want to solve, each task is automatically assigned by my chief of staff, AI agent, to the corresponding specialist agent that's most qualified to do this job. And while we speak, the team is actually working in parallel, working on different steps of the plan, and in the end, will collate the information and give us response. So this is very different from speaking to, say, ChatGPT, which has one model, which may do web search, but the future really belongs to a system where allow people to build, orchestrate, and utilize a large number of specialist AI agents. The other thing is, you can see when AI agents work on each task, it takes a series of actions. The actions could be reading the central bank policy statements, could be accessing other data sets, but also writing code and access other tools. So I think there's a major trend in the industry of actually converting the legacy systems built for human users to make them available to AI agents. So you see that the numbers here, we also asked about how the Trump policy has affected the market. So in the background, actually, it wrote code to do a back test. So the numbers, the performance metrics are very familiar to all of you, like the Sharpe ratios, Saltino ratios. Those are actually written by the AI agents using code on the fly with access to our data lake with market data. So it's implemented a very simple portfolio, back-tested before and after the Trump administration inauguration date. So this is one way for us to demonstrate how things work. The other one is we have a separate follow-up questions. And Krishna, you can. So this follow-up prompt, which way, by the way, we copy-paste from Teams, which is very convenient for our users, is to say, hey, which sectors potentially can benefit from such administration policies? And then we ask the team again to create a plan, work on it, writing code. The truth is, I don't need to worry about direct messaging each of the agents myself. And that's very important. Because think about it, I mean, by the end of 2026, each one of us may be working with hundreds of agents to amplify our daily job. It will be a very unwieldy user interface if I have to basically get notifications and have to stay in the loop with hundreds of agents working on my behalf. So it's really important to be able to build a team and let my chief of staff agent to be responsible for coordination. So that's the major UI breakthrough that we will see between now and end of next year. I think while we run that prompt, the other thing I want to show you, which is probably very relevant to the asset managers and hedge funds, is that we can actually get the team to read a description of a trading strategy, whether it's from a research paper or from the website. And just by asking them to read this article, they will be able to implement it and give me a basic draft and returns of the strategy. So this is something we can run. So here, we've published a blog post about a year ago about how to use VIX options to hedge a long-only portfolio. So VIX options are not the easiest derivatives to work with. So we wrote this article without any code. And we are basically asking the agents to read it and basically figure out what it's about. But in the prompt, it doesn't say anything, actually. In the prompt, it doesn't say anything about this article at all. So the team has to go, understand it, and implement it on the fly. And Krishna, you can switch to the previous one. I think the ETF maybe came back. Yeah. So we constructed a portfolio of equally weighted portfolio, which is aerospace, financial, gold, and financial sectors. So we back tested the whole portfolio on the fly. Took about, I think, 2 minutes. Entirely on their own. So AI agents, people ask me, what's the difference between AI agents and large language models? AI agents have an objective. So you can assign the objective, then it will pursue it almost entirely autonomously. The other one is AI agents are able to use tools and data, just like ourselves. And on this particular tail risk hedging example, you can see that the agents, actually, if you look at the tasks, one of them went to read the article on internet, understand it, summarized it, pass the information to a quant agent that take that information as a description and implement the entire VIX option tail hedge strategy on the fly. So I hope this gives you an idea about where we are building and where the industry is going. For us to really realize the full potential of GenAI, a multi-agent system is here and will become the paradigm. So at this point, I welcome back Tim.
All right.
Thank you, Tim.
Ben, thanks so much. Obviously, it's come such a long way in a very short period of time. I just want to start by asking all of you, raise your hand if you're using AI at work right now. So it looks like a little less than half, maybe half of you. What's the risk to these folks if they're not using AI right now?
So currently, we work with clients to focus on workflows that share a few characteristics. I would describe them as intellectual but not creative. For example, one of our biggest clients, they are using us to completely transform the commercial loan underwriting. To be honest, when you are the human professionals underwriting commercial loans, you don't really want to be creative. So it's a very intellectual but not creative endeavor, but it's very boring. The other one is it's very manual because, for example, on the commercial loan applications, each firm has to apply in their own format. There is no standard or template for the application. So each business just sending their documents in whatever formats that they feel comfortable with. It could be a motley pot of PDFs, slides, and Excel spreadsheets. And at this, I want to make one statement which is very interesting, which is in finance, we create documents and materials by humans for humans. So if you look at all these presentations, right, actually the most important information, we actually spend extra time to turn it into a graphic. Right? We want to visualize actually the most important information in our slides, because that's how we make an impact on the human reader. But it turns out this information in that format is really not very friendly to large language models. So a lot of our efforts want to make sure that we can actually extract that visual information into a format that we can work with using large language models.
Ben, when I saw you using Magic, demonstrating it for everybody, there was a little font at the bottom that said something along the lines of, this is not investment advice, there could be errors in here, make sure to use independent research, something along those lines. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer. What is the risk with just taking what it spits out and pasting it and giving it to your boss?
I think for regulated services and businesses, the human will stay in the loop for the foreseeable future. The regulators, the entire regulation framework it's human-centric, right? So the regulators want to make sure that someone is staying in the loop and is accountable for the actions and consequences. So in these businesses, AI agents, they can automate a huge amount of work, knowledge work. We have seen people used to spend 6 hours in processing loan applications. Now they only need to spend 30 seconds. That's 200x improvement in speed, actually makes a huge impact, but someone has to be there and supervise. That's why this user interface, UI design, is super important, because as we scale the capabilities of the intelligence, how do we make sure that the human is not overwhelmed by a new type of work?
But how do you know that what Magic produces is correct?
There are actually many ways to do it. First, as the large language models get better, they are more and more grounded. For example, the latest generations of reasoning models, they essentially have built-in self-reflection and self-critique. So the quality of the response is going up. And that's just mainly because of the pre-training and post-training breakthrough by the foundational model AI labs. But on the other hand, as we build Magic and build AI agents, we can actually build in grounding into it. So as the responses come back, we always want to provide citations, quotes, so the human can one click away from verifying it.
The whole idea behind a product such as this is to give you an edge over your competitors, to find that alpha. But what happens when my competitor asks Magic the same question that I asked? You'll get a result that's the same, and then you won't actually have that advantage?
I think if you ask exactly the same question, you'll probably get some very similar answers. But I do think the nature of the work going forward will become, each individual contributors will become a supervisor. I think that's a fundamental shift in the role, in how we do our jobs. I think today, we go in there, most of us are individual contributors. But it's like the transition from a PhD researcher, PhD student to a supervisor, to a research director. The other thing is, I think people will ask different questions. I think people have heard about the phrase prompt engineering for a few years now, but it's surprising to me how difficult or counterintuitive it is to most people. I would say there is no substitute for spending 10 hours of your time on seriously learning how to have a productive conversation and try to push the limit of what this model can do or not do. I think the difference is most likely will come down to who asks better questions and who can follow up with better questions.
So it really raises the question, I think, in the financial services industry about what this looks like if it's widely adopted in terms of what it does to workforces and how it changes the way companies think about who they need to hire and who they need to pay. If this does the work that a quant can do in 45 seconds, that would take a quant, 3 to 6 hours, then what do the quants do?
I think the quants will find more interesting things to do. The truth is, I think, if you think about it, up to this point, the technology made a difference only in the field of what we call explicit knowledge, right? We automate stuff, but in order to automate, that knowledge has to be explicit, something we can write down, codify, almost linearly. And then we get people to implement it in Python or some other programming language, then automate it. But there's a huge amount of tacit knowledge that exists, especially in industries like financial services. That's why we have human experts. They are experts because they have knowledge in their head that's based on years of experience, but that's simply impossible to write down in a very codified, simplified way. But now with large language models and AI agents, what we have learned is that for the first time, we can use AI agents to distill these tacit knowledge from human experts into automated processes. I think that's where the breakthrough will really come from.
You told me in one of our prep calls ahead of this panel that by the end of this year, the workforce will likely be half human, half AI agents. You stick to that right now?
I think half, yes. I think by the end of next year, ratio will be, for each one of us, there will be multiple AI agents. So I think by the end of this year, we'll all be very familiar with the concept of a hybrid workforce. By the end of next year, I think that ratio will only keep going.
I mean, you're talking about a fundamental shift in the way that an economy runs here. Contextualize this moment in economic history for us. Is this like the Industrial Revolution? Is it like the rise of the internet and the browser in the 1990s? Where are we?
I think about this in terms of electricity. I think we are very close to a point where intelligence in terms of streaming tokens will be on tap, similar to electricity on tap. Now, I recently looked into it. I mean, it's quite interesting. In the last 200 years, each country, on average, spent about 1% of the nominal GDP on building and upgrading the electricity grid, even today. I think during the New Deal in the 1930s, the US spent about 1.2% of GDP on building out the power grid. Actually, the first power station in the US was built in Manhattan. So 1% of GDP today is about 300 billion. So coincidentally, this year, the big tech companies have already announced 300 billion of investment into data centers. So I think the investment is not over-investment, but it's quite shocking how quickly we ramped up the investment to literally this magic number, 1% of the GDP.
You did say also a couple months ago to me that this tends to move in 3-month increments. The idea being the technological breakthroughs that we see are really happening so quickly, you have to think about the development of AI within 3-month increments. What's it going to look like a year from now?
I think for us to, given the 1% GDP investment, for us to really deliver the promise, we have to see something like 8 to 10% of GDP growth. We have to quadruple our GDP growth.
Here in the US?
Here in the US, in a world where adoption for AI is really, China is very keen to adopt AI for pretty much everything. So, and that's really when I say that's the promised land, that's the promised land, right? That's the promise we have to deliver given this kind of investment. I mean, just to illustrate how fast things have come. 3 years ago, to train the GPT-3, it only used something like a 15 to 30 megawatts data center. It was quite normal. And today, Elon Musk and Meta are building 2 gigawatts data centers, which is 10 times bigger. And for that to work, they have to build everything. They have to build their own natural gas power plant next to it. So the sheer scale of the investment is really unprecedented. But for us to deliver that promise, we have to see in the next 5 years a GDP growth of 8-10%.
You mentioned China, and I'm wondering about the country's ability to pull this off if there are export controls in place on American tech, such as we've seen with NVIDIA. Since we last spoke, everything with DeepSeek happened. How do you look at what's happening in China and whether or not they can become like a competitor to the US when it comes to AI?
I think to scale the intelligence, there are only a few variables. Number one, data. In China, the data privacy is much less a concern. And also there are many people generating data. So I think I would say China probably has an advantage in terms of having access to the quality, the quantity of the data. The second thing is just sheer talent. There are 200 papers in AI published every day. I read some of them, obviously not all of them, but one thing is very striking. You can open a random AI paper these days, about 30% to 50% of the co-authors are Chinese. So China has this big supply of talent, but same in the US. The last one is just compute. All else being equal, intelligence is basically the logarithm of compute. So you increase by 100 times, you get 10 times better intelligence. So I think China and US are really the two countries in the world who are really pushing. We require sheer amount of investment into hardware, into power, into talent, into data. But this is the first time when we build businesses where people think about the revenues, not in terms of billions of dollars, but in terms of percentage of the global GDPs. So it's really quite exciting.
Hey, I want to bring things back to magic in the last couple of minutes that we do have with you. We're Bloomberg, we love numbers. I know you're still considered a startup at this point, but just give our audience, everybody watching right now, an idea of the types of companies that are using the product. Give us some numbers like how many customers you have, if you can, and where you're seeing it be deployed.
So this version we just showed you actually is 2 months old. In the last 2 months, we built a lot of private proprietary versions for different firms, but I can't show you. So this one is actually 2 months old. So we officially launched in September 2024. We started 2 years ago. We made a very big bet 2 years ago to say this is the future. We are going to, bet the company on this. Even that took us 18 months to figure out how to do it right, because it's so new, unprecedented. We have to experiment, trial and errors. So we launched in September last year. So we got into the hands of over 150 financial institutions. We are extremely excited about the use cases we are able to deliver. So we currently focus on 3 categories. Number one, macro market research. Just because my background is from macro hedge fund, I know the field very well. People think people use magic to get some magical insight, but funny enough, actually people find it extremely useful to have an understanding of where the market has priced in. Mm-hmm. It's kind of counterintuitive. But if you think about it, right, since large language models by construction always give you the most likely word one by one, so it's actually a fantastic tool to survey the market at any point in time, understand what other people know, how other people think about it, so what the market has priced in, which is the first step toward for hedge fund managers to figure out, do I have some view that's different and how to put on a trade? So number one category, macro market research. The second is equity fundamental analysis. So we did a big talk on this because in the last 10 years, the number of equity analysts has dropped by over 35%, whereas the public market has becoming more concentrated than ever before. So we have this very weird dynamic, tens of trillions of capital going to passive. Top 26 companies are responsible for half of the market cap of S&P 500. And I don't think people can name the other 474. So in some sense, we feel like the market has become less efficient, where we need analytical power to cover more companies, but we don't have it. So we're working with equity fund managers who have, by the way, who had a very tough 15 years, just because this concentration in the top stocks. It's not really stock pickers.
The S&P 500 has performed very well over the last
it's very hard to beat.
Or so. It's been tough to beat. You did recently write that AI is going to dramatically impact financial services in terms of cost structure and profit margins.
Yeah.
Give us some numbers there.
Yeah, so put on the slide. So financial services, excluding payment globally, is a $20 trillion business, right? $20 trillion of revenue every year. And we will break it down, about $3 trillion of profits. But then in terms of costs, we think $8 trillion of costs can be hugely affected by what's going on, by what we are building in GenAI. That includes $5 trillion of staff costs, $2 trillion of risk and regulation related, and then $1 trillion of tech spend. Right? So I think $8 trillion, that's just a starting point.
Are the financial firms that you're trying to sell to or that are your customers, do you believe that they're being too cautious with their adoption of the technology?
I think they are being very cautious. But again, it's very difficult to make a very clear decision, because just given how things are moving, and it's very hard to get I think especially in large regulated businesses, to make such big decisions, you need some kind of consensus building in the firm. But by the time you build a consensus in 3 months, things have changed. So I think that in terms of the adoption in financial services, I think it will start with a few firms with visionary leadership that embrace it. And given the speed at which we can implement it, I think within 6 months, they will be able to disrupt the market segment they operate in, and then that will have knock-on effect.
We spent the entire conversation talking about sort of the optimism and the hopes and the dreams when it comes to this technology. Just in the last minute that we have, what keeps you up at night? What scares you?
First, I sleep pretty well these days because I'm so busy. So I don't have many hours to sleep, so whenever I get to sleep, I really sleep really well. So really the only thing that keeps me up is just be able to keep track of the industry. Because I honestly think maybe there are 500 people in the world who actually know exactly what's going on. There are a lot of noise, a lot of hype, sometimes pessimistic views. It's really hard to keep track of. But things are moving much faster than we ever saw. It will continue like this. So we always worry about that we err on the side of being too slow and too conservative, not really pushing the boundaries. We recently automated a very complex workflow by 300 times. That means that this firm, once we launch it, will be able to completely clean up the entire market, because their competitors takes about 8 hours, right? So we are looking to see the impact of our work, and we worry about we're not moving fast enough.